Happy Beltane. I am making another video because I realized that the one that I put on Instagram yesterday I did a live for the Taurus solar eclipse. I didn't really, I didn't take a ton of time to talk about eclipses themselves and eclipse season, and I do not have actual notes in front of me of all the details, but I just wanted to take this opportunity to kind of talk about what eclipses are, and hopefully it's kind of seeped into the collective at this point astrologically that do not fear eclipses. There's a lot of lore around eclipses because back in the day our ancestors would have been not stoked about the sun going away all of a sudden. And so I did mention in the video yesterday that was definitely would have been an impetus for making sure that we're paying attention to what's around us. And so back then, human beings really, we all rely on the sun. So the sun matters with food, etc. Warmth, life. Sun is life. And in astrology, sun is life. It's the center of who you are. Center of, just think of the center of our solar system is the center of us. And yeah, and I also kind of mentioned that just in the context of, astrology, if you're new to it, it's not new. It's not new to you. Planets have been observing you for a long time. But just thinking of the ways in which human beings have been observing our surroundings since the beginning of human beings, I do believe. And nature being something that we always observe and that hopefully we don't ignore, which we tend to ignore, and then also pay attention to it in more than we should in some ways that's not healthy for it. But it's no accident that Earth Day is around Taurus time. I think, being an Earth sign ruled by Venus really just, I was like going on a little bit about being so excited about just the beauty of nature yesterday and even today, just seeing sunlight trickling through the new leaves I'm in the Pacific Northwest near the coast, so there's a lot of new growth around here right now. And I was just looking up in a little notebook I found biodynamic info about when to plant and all of that, so that's very exciting. Which next eclipse that we're going to have, which will be in Scorpio 2 weeks from now, is a good time to plant. Can't remember the whole list, but for my area, so I'm going to do that. And so the nose moved into Taurus Scorpio somewhat recently, and so this is the first real set of all the eclipses are on that axis. They call it Taurus Scorpio. So the North Node being in Taurus is wanting us all to really understand self-reliance more, the story around our resources, and also, eclipses are linked in 19-year cycles. I get that mixed up sometimes, but I do believe it's 19 right now because there's different eclipse families. And so you can literally go back to 19 years ago, what was happening, which I haven't actually done the math on that for myself. I'm in 2003. Interesting. So it's a good thing to think about if you want to do a little, ritual something around this time, is to just take note of this 19-year chapter and what's been happening. And then 2 weeks from now, Scorpio, same thing. So yeah, just think back to that time in your life in 2003. And so South Node being in Scorpio is what do we need to let go around how we experience, understand, misuse, use power structures. Pluto's more than power. Pluto, represented in mythology, is that I'm familiar with, is Hades, the god of the underworld. And just thinking about what that means, that it's not just death, but it's it's death and transformation. But I've also been using the word regeneration a lot lately because that just evokes more of, sometimes, it's easy to think of the butterfly emerging with its beautiful wings and then flies on. But what happens after, right? There's something that happens after. And that, regeneration also evokes to me that endings and beginnings they come hand in hand. They're linked. you know, very closely that sometimes, and that's something about eclipses is endings and beginnings. So the solar eclipse we just had is like new beginnings, and it's always interesting to observe because sometimes they're flipped, if you will, during eclipse season. And sometimes we'll start with a lunar eclipse. So it's like, oh, okay, so we have the ending before the beginning, and sometimes we have the beginning before the ending. But the other thing is that sometimes it's not so clean, right? That we'll have, you know, an ending. Like when there's an ending, there is a beginning. When there's a beginning, there is an ending. There's, you know, nature abhors a vacuum. Like if there's space, it's going to be taken up, right? Something new is coming in. And so sometimes it's easy to mix those up, and it can be a bittersweet time or experience in one's life to be able to really, you know, appreciate what's new and say goodbye to the old. And sometimes maybe we have some cleanup to do around that. And so that's, you know, inevitably going to happen, but also a good thing to happen during eclipse season. So it's a lights on, lights off moment, you know, powering down your computer, turning it back on, a reset. And so how wonderful is that? So yeah, don't be scared of eclipses. And there's also some information out there around like, oh, should I not be doing things? Should I be doing things around this time? And just be thoughtful about, you know, what new things you're starting, what old things you're ending. And so yeah, this time, this season for us is really about just having, because the solar eclipse, especially yesterday, was Uranus is right there near where the sun and moon were. So there's definitely like a like louder kind of demand, a swift change in the order of things, possibly around how we understand, you know, how we experience ourselves, our bodies, our, you know, nature, our physical surroundings, what we value in our lives. So, you know, Venus rules Taurus. Venus is what we love and value. That's a lot of things. And she's also the ruler of Libra. That's more like relationships and connections with others. But Taurus, resources, the senses, you know what, it's art, beauty, love. It's, but it's also, and this might be more of a Libra thing, but there's some mixing up going on, right? But there's a sense of like equality and fairness. And as that applies to Taurus, I think it's more about really understanding that, you know, sometimes we can give too much of ourselves. So where is the equality in how you're understanding what's yours and what's others, and how that may be mixed up sometimes, but really just coming into like, what does self-reliance mean to me, you know, in the physical world, in the emotional world, in a somatic world of how we experience, you know, our physical nature. All of that is up right now. And I think there's a lot more to say, but I just wanted to, yeah, explain a little bit more about eclipses and the nodes and all of that. And then I guess what I mentioned briefly yesterday with this solar eclipse is that Saturn and Vesta are squaring the nodes. And so that's what we call a skip step when you look at someone's birth chart. And it signifies in a birth chart that there's some things, some lessons, some archetypes that haven't been fully explored or whatever in a previous lifetime or earlier in someone's life. And so we're here to address it and, you know, go through those lessons. And so on a collective level, all of us are going through a lesson right now of like, okay, what should we not be missing? What do we need to be observing and really absorbing around these lessons of responsibility? Because that's Saturn, you know, practicality, what's real, what isn't, what's solid, what isn't. And Vesta is like what we, you know, are passionate about, what we want to be invested in, how we're keeping the fire stoked. Thinking about, like, people say home and hearth for Vesta. And so yeah, how are we changing the way that we may be invested in some things or not, you know, literally financially or ourselves or others. I do think it's definitely relationship based because of the chart that I ran yesterday, and then also it's in Aquarius. So there is like it's relationships, but also like on a collective level. So what kind of responsibilities are we taking that need to be changed around how, you know, what we're doing in the world affects other people, and what is the long-term vision around that. So I think that's all I have to say. I always have a lot more to say. I'm hoping to post stuff here more regularly. So I, whether you found this, you know, through my website by accident or through Instagram, hello, goodbye. And oh, you can find readings. I did them in different, they're available in different times now, chunks of time. So 30, 60, and 100 or 90 minutes. So that's my full reading. But that way, hopefully, it makes it a little more, you know, feasible for people monetarily. As we're in Taurus season, we might as well talk about that, money. And then there's a little direction in each of the listing on kind of what you can expect for that period of, or that chunk of time for reading, and what, you know, what we can explore. So thank you for being here, and I will see you later.